Hey there, it's time for another Instagram Live. I hope people join this. Hello there, a couple of people joining right now. How's everybody doing? It's I don't know what day of the lockdown this is for you. I think New York began locking down on March 22nd, so it's roughly like, I don't know, 11 days of lockdown, but there was already social distancing before then. Hey there, Alice. Does it feel, it feels to me like 3.5 weeks ago, I was in the Netherlands, and yes, coronavirus was a topic of conversation, but if you ask the average person on the street, hey, are you thinking about coronavirus? They would have said no. That was just 3.5 weeks ago. The entire world has changed since then in so many dramatic ways. Like, the economy has shut down. Tens of millions of people around the world have gone from employed to their lives turned upside down and unemployed. Hello from Amsterdam. I was just in Amsterdam. I was just talking about it. I performed at your comedy cafe 4 weeks ago. So, again, the whole world's changed since then. We were all kind of going to gatherings. We were going to restaurants. We were going to comedy clubs. And now everybody is by themselves or with their families, and everything has changed, and that is taking a toll. So much uncertainty. Like, there's uncertainty about health. Like, are you remaining healthy enough? Are you doing social distancing? Are others in your family healthy? Then there's financial insecurity. Like, are you going to lose your job? How is this going to affect your stocks? How is this going to affect your assets? And then there's kind of world insecurity. Like, what happens if the new normal is so new that it's unpleasant? Like, what if you have to make an appointment to go to the grocery store? Or what if elections are suspended? Or what if, I don't know, they're not able to let people go back to work within another month? Like, how will this affect the economy? Everything is just so uncertain. And again, people don't feel pain from the lockdown. I mean, if you think about it, probably most people are more than happy to stay home from work and watch TV or read books or spend time with their family. So the lockdown by itself is not bad. It's the entire feeling of uncertainty of what this lockdown means. Because if you think about all the three types of uncertainty, health, everybody I know is more healthy now. People are washing their hands, they're taking supplements, they're trying to eat well because nobody wants to get this coronavirus. So people are actually, there's less pollution, so people are healthier even if they go outside. So that's one level of uncertainty where people are actually better on the whole. Here's an interesting statistic. Do you know fewer people died in the first 3 months of the year than in prior years? So for instance, 12 million people around the world died between January 1st and now. Of course, 40,000 of those deaths, give or take, was from coronavirus, but 12 million is a lot of people. 40,000 from coronavirus is just what? It's 1/3 of 1% of that comes from coronavirus, this horrible disease which has shut down the world. But again, I'll say it again, 12 million people overall have died around the world from other things, not coronavirus. They've died from, cancer or long-term sicknesses or accidents or whatever. But this year, because of what's happening, fewer people have died than prior years because there's far fewer car accidents. There's far fewer, violent crimes because everyone's indoors. There's far fewer, deaths related to addiction, deaths related to being in the hospital, school shootings. There's less of everything since this pandemic started. So it's kind of this weird statistic that, if you look at it on a health level, as a society, we're probably healthier than we were a few months ago. On a societal level, there's less pollution. There's fewer deaths around the world overall. On a financial level, we just got this enormous stimulus package in the U.S., and which is going to affect the entire world. And every country is doing stimulus packages in their own country, but the stimulus package in the U.S. is trillions and trillions of dollars. So whether you feel the impact of that tomorrow or 6 months from now, every single citizen of the United States and probably the world will benefit from the stimulus package in the U.S. That doesn't mean they can keep affording it. Eventually, people will lose trust in the US dollar if they keep doing stimulus packages. That's the problem with doing too much of this. But $2 trillion, which is similar to, it's like double what they did for 2009, that's probably doable. But so in every level, health, financial, and societal, you can look at some sort of positives that have occurred because of this lockdown and because of this pandemic. But at the same time, nobody's happy. The uncertainty is so much that it's kind of driving everyone crazy. People are unhappy being, stuck in their house. People are worried about their jobs. People are worried about what's going to happen in society because, again, human beings do not like uncertainty. We evolved to hate uncertainty. If our ancestors passed a bush there was some sound at the bush, they wouldn't wait and see if that was a wind or if it was a lion. They would just assume it was a lion and they would run. So again, humans do not like uncertainty. They hate it. And the ancient human beings who didn't mind uncertainty, who stuck around to ask, is this a lion or not? Those ancient humans died, so they didn't have descendants. We're descended from the people who hated uncertainty. So that's why this period is so kind of is weighing on our mental health, on our emotional health, even though if you think about every area, financial, health, and societal, there's actual improvements. So societal, there's less pollution. Societal, there are actually fewer deaths overall because we're locked down, because there's no car accidents, there's no malpractice in the hospitals, there's less addiction deaths, and on and on. And on financial, every country's put together this stimulus package so that small businesses that were in trouble a few months ago are actually being saved now because they're going to be able to borrow like a ton of money. And individuals who are like in between jobs anyway, they're going to get checks from the government. So an unemployment insurance is basically in the United States $1,000 a week, and it's extended for 39 weeks. So people are going to feel flush within the next few months. But still, the uncertainty is weighing. When will this end? When will this end? So I just read this great research report. It was published by University of Southern California, USC. The guy's name's Gerard Tellis. And the title of this report is, How Long Should Social Distancing Last? And it kind of says almost exactly what we've been saying on these IG Lives, is that the timeline of these pandemics in each country, or in the United States, you almost have to look city by city, but in each location, the timeline is about 3 months from beginning to end, maybe 4 months. And so if you say the U.S. started on, or let's say New York City started on March 1st, or the U.S. started on March 1st, the peak should be around April 15th, and the end of the pandemic, when we have it completely under control, should be around the end of May, early June, give or take. Now, in this paper, they actually say New York should peak around April 5th, and the date of control should be around April 22nd. And they also said Italy probably stabilized on March 23rd, and it'll be gone from Italy around April 14th. Spain, they predict, is going to stabilize today, and it'll peak around April 14th. So all of this is good news. By the way, this is not inconsistent news. This is what people have been saying all along. Even Bill Gates, who has been somewhat of a pessimist, says the virus should probably peak in the U.S. by mid to late April. So this article says in New York by April 5th, but maybe in the U.S. as a whole it'll be April 15th, which is what I've been saying. And, we have that to look forward to. It's not, some people are saying, oh no, we're going to have to be quarantined for 18 to 24 months. Who knows? That's ridiculous. We don't even know if full quarantining is working because people are still going outside. Essential workers are still outside. People are still taking walks around the block, which they should, to get sunshine and vitamin D, and it's healthy to get a little bit of exercise. So it could be the case that some level of just moderate social distancing and keep sticking with it even after the economy comes back. It could be the case that moderate social distancing is what every society just needs to do until this virus is under control. But that doesn't mean shut down the economy. I think what will happen is by the end of April, the U.S. economy is going to be pretty much reopened, and they're going to encourage people to do aggressive social distancing, aggressive testing, and aggressive quarantining of positives. So for instance, in my building, I just got an email 2 minutes ago. In my building, there's one person in the building who has come down with coronavirus. And that person is under quarantine now, apparently, and will be for 14 days, is stuck in a room. I would hate to be that person, but it is what it is. And so you just have to be careful. On the elevator, everybody wears gloves now to touch buttons on the elevator. So I do think the important thing to remember is try to find the things that you're certain about, because uncertainty is like a poison to the brain. Here's what we know for certainty, is that this pandemic will end. It's not going to go on till the end of the year. I mean, there might be a second wave, but the pandemic, if you live in any country which has the pandemic right now, look at when it started, add 3 or 4 months, that's probably when it's going to end, and in the middle of that period is when it's going to peak. Now, whether it's a high peak or a low peak depends on the social distancing, depends where you are. Again, I'm looking at this report, how long should social distancing last? I just read this report this morning, but it's not saying anything we haven't been saying here all along. New York is saying it might peak around April 5th and then be in control around April 22nd. South Korea, it says it probably ended March 29th. Italy, it says it'll end April 14th, but it probably peaked on March 23rd. So that's all good news. But so these are things which have some certainty to them. So what else is certain in our lives right now? So one thing that's certain is this is a fact, there have been less deaths overall around the world this year so far than other years. And the reason is because we're all indoors, we're not having traffic accidents, there's fewer violent crimes, there's fewer people going to the hospital. Of course, hospital is a place where a lot of deaths occur. So I don't know, I'm not saying this is a good thing, I'm just saying what are the things we can be certain about? The other thing we're certain about, and it depends on what country you're in, but in the US, there's been this $2 trillion stimulus package passed, plus another $4 trillion in stimulus announced by the Federal Reserve. That's going to have this huge, enormous effect on the economy. Of course, it only works if we have an economy. If everyone's staying home, then stimulus really has very little effect. But if the economy reopens, an enormous effect is going to happen. I just got a list of all the ways small businesses could borrow money. It's insane how much money, and it used to be the case if you were a small business, you would have to wait, you'd have to fill out all these paperwork, you'd have to wait 90 days to get approval. Now, from what I understand, and we'll see, they're begging to give out money to small businesses. So you just show up at the bank, in the next few days, and the loans are all ready for you. And these are like almost zero interest loans. A lot of the loans are going to be forgiven. The loans are, go out for years and years, so it's a long time before you have to pay them back. Everyone who can should try to get loans based on this stimulus. There's $2 trillion to go around, so you might as well have your hand out. I don't care if you're rich, medium, poor. Go to the bank and see how much money you can get from them because they want to give you money. The Federal Reserve is telling the banks, hey, here's a big check for $2 trillion. Give it out as fast as you can because we need this economy to come back. And then when the economy actually does reopen, earlier I was saying it needs to reopen first or second week of April, then the stimulus package got passed. And on my podcast the other day, Tyler Cohen, an economist, convinced me that it could probably handle a month or two with this stimulus. Because here's the other thing that's certain. People are not buying shit anymore. It's not like you're going to the store and buying clothes. It's not like you're going to the store and buying a watch or a car or a boat or a vacation. Like the only thing I've spent money on in the past few weeks is food and books from Amazon. And that's it. So everybody kind of as a globe has realized, we don't really need as many material possessions that we needed before. And even though it's important for spending to kick back in once the economy reopens, I know, another thing I'm certain about is that Americans spend money. They're not really used to saving money, so it's not like all of a sudden all of America is going to save money. But I know I'm probably going to think less about material goods than I did before. And I was already pretty low on that totem pole. Like some of you would know, I spent several years just living in Airbnbs with only a carry-on bag. So one time, my rent was up, and I didn't want to rent again. I didn't want to own. So what do you do if you don't own and if you don't rent? Well, I didn't have any furniture. I didn't have any belongings. I went to California from New York City with a carry-on bag, and I asked a friend of mine, please come to my house and throw everything out, or give it to charity, or keep it for yourself, or sell it, but I never want to hear about any of my possessions again. So she came to my house, and with her whole family, it took them a week, they threw out everything, or got rid of everything I ever owned in my entire life. So I came back from California with just this carry-on bag, and I started living in Airbnbs. I lived in Airbnbs for about 2.5 years, and I never bought something unless it fit in my carry-on bag. So I would have to throw something out from my carry-on bag in order to buy something new. So I almost never bought anything new except like t-shirts. And I didn't really do laundry that much. So every few days at the local drugstore, you could buy 3 t-shirts for $14, and I would do that. And the cheaper t-shirts were $11. I splurged and bought the more expensive ones for $14. But we can survive without material goods. We can survive staying home for a little bit. We can survive even without a job for a little while because of this stimulus package. And yes, when the economy reopens, not all the jobs are coming back, but new industries and new jobs will be created. So and with unemployment insurance now extended for 10 months, I'm very confident that the sooner the economy is reopened, the sooner this surge happens where we all feel flush and even wealthy from the stimulus that happened. Now, if the economy doesn't reopen till June 1st instead of May 1st, I'm a little more nervous because I don't know. An economy is not meant to shut down. There's no such thing as shutting the light switch off on an economy, waiting 3 months and then turning it back on. That has never happened before in society. Now, it could happen in China because they're a communist society. It could happen in Italy because they weren't working anyway. But in the United States, which basically feeds the world's economy, in the United States, you cannot shut down the economy. There's no such thing. Right now, the economy is not shut down. Right now, the economy is failing and is broken. So the faster we reopen, the faster the economy is fixed with this stimulus package as a very temporary Band-Aid. You cannot pass 3 stimulus bills like this and expect your country to survive. Your country will be a completely different country. So that's and they know this. So they're not bringing this back. They're not keeping us in lockdown for all of that long. So the important thing is again to keep track of what you're actually certain about, because what's the real killer here when we're all in lockdown is the uncertainty. So what's certain? The certainty is this will end. The certainty is if you stay home, you probably won't get the virus. You probably won't transmit it. That's pretty certain. What's certain is that this stimulus package was passed, so the economy is going to come back pretty strong if the economy reopens soon. And you can also start speaking about, well, okay, here's another thing that's certain. People aren't going to be going out to restaurants as much. So the industry of remote delivery is going to be more powerful. Remote working is going to be on the rise. So if you can come up with a business model for remote working, that's going to be a good business model. Robotics are going to be on the rise. Drones are going to be on the rise. Biotech is going to be on the rise. Again, online education is something that I'm a huge fan of. I think that if you could think of a business model there, it's going to be a $1 billion company. And again, it's never too late to come up with business ideas. Like, take Uber as an example. Uber uses technology you could have made, 15 years earlier. Uber is not rocket science. It's just an idea that was then implemented. So it's possible that the next Uber could come out of this crisis. Think about when businesses have started. So Uber actually started, I believe, during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Airbnb started around the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. Facebook was developed right after the financial problems in 2002, early 2003 when we were going to war. So that's Facebook. Microsoft and Apple were born in the recessions of the 70s. Hewlett-Packard, one of the biggest computer companies of the century, started in the middle of the Great Depression. So now is the time to start saying, how am I going to reinvent myself? I don't have to just go back to some shitty job in a cubicle. I can start laying the groundwork now for my next career, my next job, my next passion. So what I do is I regularly list what are the things that I was passionate about when I was a kid, or what are the things that I always secretly wanted to do. Maybe did you want to be a professional poker player? Okay, learn poker. You wanted to be a novelist? Come up with 10 ideas for novels. Maybe start writing one. Maybe read some books on how to write a novel. You don't even have to be a good writer to write a novel. Most best-selling novels are not really that well written. They just have good plots. And you can write a novel in a month, no problem, if you just put three hours a day into it. And, maybe that's a potential new career. Or maybe you start a business. I've been thinking of various business ideas. For the first time in many years, I'm starting to think, I don't even like starting a business. I hate entrepreneurship, actually. The business is not fun. The ideas are fun for me. And then I don't really like the business of business. But for the first time in years, I'm thinking of different business ideas. So, for instance, is there a way, I'm thinking of different ideas with online education. What's also really important is, there's all these content creators. Like if you're on YouTube and you make videos, you only make money if you have millions of subscribers, or if you're on Twitter, or if you're on Instagram, if you're on TikTok, you only make money if you have tens of millions of followers. But what about all the other people who make really good videos but don't have millions of subscribers? They're not going to get advertisers, but maybe there's a way to help those. Maybe there's a business model of, I've been playing around with ideas of creating a tip jar for content creators to help content creators make money, to allow people to tip content that they love and have different incentives to tip and so on. So maybe there's a business model there. Again, right now, when we're talking about $2 trillion in stimulus, I'm surprised more people aren't setting up stimulus advisory services. If you really understand this stimulus package, just put an ad up on Facebook. Hey, questions about the stimulus package? Call me and charge for your time. What loan should I apply for? I live in Connecticut, or I live in New York City, or I live in California. What loan should I apply for? Can I defer my taxes? Can I defer my student loans? People don't know the answers. This is a big bill. It's $2 trillion of stimulus. It's very confusing. So if someone could help even me, I would pay if someone could help me through all the ins and outs of the stimulus package. So all of these things are important. The other thing is, money is a little bit, money is a weird concept right now. What are you actually spending money on? Like I said earlier, well, if you're really in financial trouble, they can't evict you. They can't, whether you're paying rent or mortgage, in most states now, they're not allowed to evict you. So if you're in financial trouble, don't pay your rent, don't pay your mortgage, don't pay your credit cards, don't pay your student loans, don't pay medical bills, don't pay anything. And I'm not saying to bilk the system. Obviously not. Eventually you'll pay them. Eventually you'll pay these things. But don't do it right now. And then go to the bank in the next few days and see what loans you might be applicable for. But whatever you do, don't let a single dime leave your bank account if it absolutely does not have to leave it right now. Because we don't know how long we're going to be in lockdown. We don't know what this stimulus package is going to look like. There's a little too much uncertainty. So the one thing that's certain is if there's cash in your bank account, that's your cash. So don't be so eager to give it away. Now, I wanted to talk about, one model for businesses. So again, every business in the world has three parts. Okay, there's part one is there are some people who have an excess amount of inventory of things you need. Part two is there are people who need the excess inventory. And then part three is this branch in the middle that mediates between the two sides. So it makes sure money gets transferred, it makes sure it's secure, it helps you find people who solve your problems. So a great example is Uber. Uber has those three parts. So Uber, there's a lot of people who have cars that have empty seats all day long. There's a bunch of people who want to sit in those empty seats during the day to get from one location to another. And then Uber is the platform that mediates between those two sides. It helps you find cars, it helps you find customers, it makes the transaction secure, it has a complaint center. Airbnb, on one part is people who have houses with extra rooms, with empty rooms. On the other side is people who want to stay in those rooms. And then Airbnb is this platform in the middle that helps you find, helps each side find each other and takes care of the transactions, security, everything. So with every business you think of, try to think of it in those terms. Another business practice that I thought was very interesting. So I talked with Jim McElvey recently. He's the co-founder of Square. I don't know how many of you use Square, but whenever time you run a credit card through like your iPhone, you're using a Square device. It helps mom and pop stores accept credit cards. So Jim McElvey, the co-founder, he told me that whenever you find a business model that can serve the bottom third of society, you're going to win. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar win. And so Square, as an example, helps all the stores that couldn't get credit card authorizations done. So they were too small. So Square made it happen for the billion mom and pop businessmen and businesswomen who needed to accept credit cards. So, and then I wonder, what other businesses are like that? Well, pawn shops, think of a pawn shop or payday lending. A pawn shop is essentially a bank for people who don't have a bank. So people who are very poor or unemployed or whatever, they don't have enough money to put into the bank, but every now and then they need to borrow money. So they bring in their gold watch or whatever, and they borrow money from the pawn shop. So here's the problem for pawn shops, is that pawn shops also can't get loans from the banks to be able to lend out to other people. So you could almost set up like a little mini bank for pawn shops, and I bet you that will do really well. Like you could charge 15% interest to pawn shops because pawn shops charge almost 100% interest to their clients. So that's another kind of business model. And by the way, you could ask, well, why is he actually saying all these ideas? Are these bad ideas and he's keeping the good ideas for himself? I actually think this idea of a tip jar for content creators who normally don't have access to monetizing their content, I think that's actually a great idea. It's a huge idea. I kind of want to do it. But I give ideas out for free because you always want to have a feeling of abundance, even in a time you want to feel as abundant as possible when everyone else is feeling scarce. And I guarantee you'll always make more money when you share the abundance. So there's a technique I call the Google technique. So I'll describe what the Google technique is. I used to, build websites for different people, and I used to write columns for the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times. And whenever I would link to another site, the editors would always get upset at me. They said, you can't link. You're at the Wall Street Journal site. We don't want people linking out to some company, or we don't want people linking out to some other blog. We want people to stay on the wallstreetjournal.com. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do it that way. Then people won't come back. And so I would describe to them, and nobody ever listened to me. Not once did anyone listen to me. But I described to them, there was a little company whose entire business model, their entire business was they had a website. You would go to their website, and their entire job of this website was to get you to leave as quickly as possible. And so that company, of course, was Google. You go to Google and you say, hey, do you know anything about motorcycles? And Google comes back and says right away, we don't know anything about motorcycles, but here are the 10 sites we think know the most about motorcycles. Why don't you check out those sites? And so Google measures success internally by how fast people leave Google to go to other websites. Then when you need to know about, herpes or whatever, where do you go? You go back to google.com. That's how you find your information. So I call this the Google technique, which is if you give constantly as much as possible, or if you just selflessly kind of send people to other websites, send people to other resources, give people ideas, for Google's $1.5 trillion company and they created $1.5 trillion in value just by following this Google technique that I'm describing. So what if you individually apply the Google technique? So every time someone comes to you with a question, you help them out by showing them other people, other resources, other ways that they can benefit other than benefiting you. So, and if you do that, I don't know, maybe you'll have huge value. I have found in my own life that the more value I give people, the better off it is for me. People create, opportunities come out of thin air. So yesterday I talked about writing 10 ideas a day down. I also talked about this technique I use called conspiracy numbers. How do you determine if an idea is a good idea or a not good idea? I do think the Google technique is a great way to model not only behavior, but businesses. So if you come up with a business plan where you're just constantly thinking how much you can give to the customer without even thinking about yourself, then that will ultimately be a huge business, because everyone's going to come back to the person who's abundant, not to the person who's like, oh no, I can't tell you that. I remember one time I was doing a podcast interview with a really annoying guy. I hate this guy. And hate's a strong word, but I hate him anyway. And I kept asking him questions, and he's like, oh, well, if you read the book, if your audience reads the book, they'll know the answer to that question. So he was just trying to get people to buy his shitty little book. And finally I said to him, the more information you give here and the more friendly you are on this podcast, the more people are going to buy your book. If you keep saying to me, oh, I'm not going to answer your question because then people won't buy the book, fewer people are going to, that's a scarcity complex. And I can guarantee you, few people will buy that book. This is a really important truth. So I finished the interview, but it's one of the only podcasts I never released because it was a bad podcast, because he just didn't understand how life works, how scarcity versus abundance works. And you can't interview people like that. I'm not a billboard, I'm doing an interview. So, but again, that Google technique of constantly being very transparent about what you know and what you don't know, and then sending people to the right people and resources as quickly as possible, that's what makes you the one everybody returns to, everybody will give opportunities to. And if Google's worth $1.5 trillion, following their same model, even as a human, will make you worth more money. And I've seen it work in my own life and for others, and so on. So that's an important business lesson. And plus the business lesson of always thinking that every business, like an Uber or an Airbnb, has three parts: people with excess inventory, people who need the inventory, and then some mediating platform in the middle to kind of mediate it. So for instance, here's an example of that. I came up with one idea. Podcasts are very hard to monetize. It's hard to find an advertiser. I cannot go to Microsoft and say, Microsoft, please advertise on my podcast. Instead, I go to a company called Midroll, and they find advertisers for my podcast, and they do a good job, but they take a big percentage, which is fine with me. I like the job that they do. But what if there was a podcast, a sponsorship exchange? So on one side are all the podcast advertising dollars work. Like, you will see sales go up if you advertise on a podcast. So there's a universe of people who have excess dollars to spend on ads that work for them. And there's 2 million podcasts. So what if there's a platform in the middle that connects podcasts with all the people who want to sponsor or advertise on podcasts? So this way you serve the bottom 2/3 of podcasts. Like, there might be podcasts that have very small audiences, but it's still, somebody might want to spend just $10 putting an ad there. And then there are sponsors who are not Microsoft, but who are small businesses that want to advertise on a podcast, that they're not, Midroll would never accept them, or other companies would never accept them because they're too small. But on this exchange, this serves the bottom thirds of both populations. So it's probably a very good business idea. And that's an idea I'm thinking of actually implementing. Now, again, why am I sharing it? Am I sharing it because it's a bad idea and I'm keeping all the good ideas to myself? No, I'm actually sharing the ideas I've had in the past few days that I think are the best ideas. And I do think opportunity comes to those who give freely and who are abundant with their advice and abundant with what they're giving, and so on. So I'm gonna answer some questions, but it looks like my feed has slowed down. Somebody was supposed to email me some questions, so let me see if I've been emailed questions. Yes. Okay. Thoughts on airline stocks. Okay. First off, let's talk about stocks in general. this is what I've been saying since the beginning of these Instagram lives. And by the way, the very first Instagram live I did, the stock market was roughly where it is now. And people said, should we buy? Is this a buying opportunity? And the answer is yes and no. So certainly stocks are going to be higher than where they are now at some point in probably the near future, probably within the next few months even. As soon as the economy reopens and the stimulus kicks in, stocks are going to be higher. There are many, many stocks that are huge bargains right now. Then the question is, should you buy? And I would say no, because if when things are so panicky, who are we to decide if the panic is over? Like, I'm not smart enough to decide that. And I like to sleep at night. It's too stressful for me. When the market goes up 10% one day and down 10% the next, even when it goes up, that's not good news. A market that goes up 10% in one day is an insane market. There's no way that that's not insane, that the entire value of the world economy changes 10% in one day, either up or down. So I don't invest in the stock market when things are this panicky. But that said, you're not going to miss the bottom. Even if you miss the very bottom, because of this stimulus, there's so much money that's going into the economy, the stock market can easily double from here within the next 2 years, call it, even year and a half. It could double, no problem, but it will definitely be higher. And you'll have plenty of opportunities in that time to find opportunities. There's going to be opportunities in tech, because now there's going to be more pressure on the internet. So all the tech stocks that fuel the internet, they're going to go up. Amazon will go up. Google will go up. A lot of cannabis stocks will go up. People have been, the cannabis industry has been surging because people are buying pot nonstop to deal with their anxiety. There's many industries that are going to take off after this. Now but you asked specifically about airline stocks, and airline stocks, no. I think we made a huge mistake in the federal stimulus package. The government's giving $58 billion to bail out the airline industry. That should have gone directly to employees of the airlines. Airlines historically go bankrupt and then they come back. So Warren Buffett even said the fastest way to have $1 billion is to start off with $2 billion and buy an airline. So airline stocks are really very rarely a good investment. And it's not like, are you actually thinking of going on an airplane the day after the economy reopens? No. So like whatever you're not going to do once the economy reopens, it's probably not a good investment. So for instance, commercial real estate, that's probably going to tank because it turns out 44% of the workforce is fine working at home. Now, that means you need less offices, which means less commercial real estate is going to be rented. Also, commercial real estate rents storefronts to stores and restaurants. I'm not shopping for clothes in a store the day after the economy reopens. I'm just going to order from Amazon clothes or food or whatever. So I'm probably not going to go to restaurants as much, or there's probably going to be limitations on how you go to restaurants. So nobody is thinking to themselves, boy, I can't wait for this economy to reopen because I want to start a brand new restaurant in New York City. 0 people are saying that. So commercial real estate, which benefits from thinking like that, is probably going to go down the tubes. And I don't know how you solve that. That could be a lingering problem. And there's going to be some lingering problems in the economy. Real estate's going to be a problem for a while, at least in some areas, particularly commercial real estate. Probably residential real estate in big cities are going to be problems. Restaurants, certainly. Airlines, hotels. I'm kind of worried about Airbnb, even Uber. Think about Uber for a second. Uber is what I call a welfare company. Like, Uber only exists because of welfare. And I don't mean government welfare. I mean venture capitalists keep writing checks, or they did keep writing checks to Uber, and it was losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, who was benefiting from those hundreds of millions of dollars? Me and you. If we took an Uber, the cost of our ride was cut in half probably because of all the money they were losing. They were losing money because the rides were so cheap. So those sort of welfare companies are not going to do well coming out of this because everyone's going to be shy about investing in private companies after this. And in part because there's so many opportunities among public companies. This is the first time in 8 years maybe, that the bargains on public companies are just as good as the opportunities in investing in private companies. So for the past 10 years, I've almost only invested in private companies, but now over the next few months, I'm going to start to, for the first time in years, really look at public companies that could go up 100%, 200%, 300% or more, because those companies exist now. They did not exist a few weeks ago. They exist now. So that's any other questions? Somebody asked, what about something that aggregates cabs? So in New York City, there's 2 different cab apps that are like Uber, where I could summon a cab from my phone, and there's also Uber and Lyft. So I'm guessing what this question is asking. What if you created one app which has kind of a hook into Uber, Lyft, and all the other cab apps, and so when I send out, I need a ride, it automatically, I don't just see the Uber map or the Lyft map or the Curb map, which is the New York City cab app. I see all the maps combined, and so I get to use all of the apps at once in one platform. I don't know if that's allowed, but that certainly seems like a good idea to me, is to aggregate Uber, Lyft, and any other transportation app in your particular city and put it all into one app and that will drive down. It'll make it more competitive to get a ride, so it'll drive down pricing, so it'll make things cheaper for the consumer. It also might make things easier for non-Uber apps that are involved in transportation, because they'll have a bigger audience. So I think that's a good idea, a cab aggregator. I just don't know if it's technically possible. So I'll tell you a story. One time I wanted to create an app, and you're going to think this is a bad idea. It probably is a bad idea, called the Going Steady app. So I was having dinner with this friend of mine, and the friend said he was there with his girlfriend, and he was a 45-year-old guy, and he's like, me and my girlfriend, we just started Going Steady. We had the conversation, and I'm like, what are you guys in high school? Like, what does Going Steady even mean now? And he said, well, we deleted all our dating apps. And so I thought, well, what if you create a Going Steady app? So let's say I'm going out with somebody, and I'm married to somebody, but let's say when I first started going out with her, we decided, hey, this is the real deal. We're committed to each other. So then we connect with each other on the Going Steady app, and it automatically deletes all the dating apps on both phones, and it also announces on your social media, so James and Robin are now going steady, and they've deleted all their dating apps. You too can get the Going Steady app, and it also notifies me if she loads, and it notifies one side if the other side loads up or downloads any new dating app. And I thought this was a fun idea, and so I spec'd it out. I went to freelance.org or freelance.com, and I put the spec, and at freelance.com you can hire programmers in India or Malaysia or Indonesia. They pitch you. They say, I can do that job for you, and it'll cost you $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever. It's a reverse auction, so the prices go down. And then I had one question, which was, can one app see the other apps that are on the phone? So the Going Steady app would need to see Tinder and Hinge and, Grindr and all those other apps. So it turns out, and this is what I learned really quickly, it turns out apps on Android could do that, but apps on iOS can't do that. So I threw out that idea was not a good idea anymore. The Going Steady app sounded like a good idea, but it turned out not to be a good idea. But what my point here is that it's always good, if you have an idea you think is good, figure out what the next 2 or 3 steps are to test that idea before you go ahead and build it, or before you raise money for it. Because it took me an hour to come up with the idea, and then I sketched out every page of the app, and then it took me an hour to post on freelance.com and ask questions to developers, and then I found out the answer, and within 2 hours, I learned a huge amount. I learned about Android programming, I learned about iOS programming, I learned about how apps work, I learned what all the dating apps were and how they work, and then I learned something new about the operating systems that I didn't know. So the way you gain knowledge, the way you gain mastery in any one topic is by doing experiments. So there's this thing called the 10,000 hour rule. So this is another important point. The 10,000 hour rule is bullshit. Like 10,000 hour rule says, if you work really hard at something for 10,000 hours and you get feedback all along the way from a mentor or a teacher, then you'll be among the best in the world. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I think that's true if you really like memorizing lists of numbers, or if you like playing with the yo-yo or some other stupid skill like that. Actually, the yo-yo skill seems pretty cool, but still, maybe the 10,000 hour rule works for something like that. But in general, I like what I'm calling the 1,000 experiment rule. So if you can think of experiments each day to do in an area that you want to improve in, or in an area that you want to be successful in, if you do 1,000 experiments, you are going to be an enormous, enormous success. Every day, I try to do some experiments. So for instance, that day when I was doing that app I call the Going Steady app, that was an experiment. It was an experiment on, is this a good idea? How would I do it? What can I do? And I learned a huge amount with just one tiny experiment. It cost me almost no time. It cost me zero money, and it had huge upside. Like if it was a good idea, and if I did do it, maybe I would have made millions on that one idea. So no downside, huge upside. And if you do 100 experiments like that, you're going to have accumulated so much knowledge. And if one of the experiments really works out, or even call it 1,000 experiments, if even one experiment works out, you'll make millions or tens of millions of dollars. A kind of cliche example is Thomas Edison. He, tested different conductors, over 1,000 different wires he experimented with until he found the right one on the 1,000th experiment. And then he created, the light bulb. And he started General Electric, one of the biggest companies ever on the planet. General Electric, it's been around since Thomas Edison. It's one of the longest lived big companies. So just doing experiments was what created success for someone like Thomas Edison. Many entrepreneurs are more successful because they experiment with ideas rather than because they dive for years into a bad idea. So you always want to do as many experiments as possible to help you figure out which ideas are good and which ideas are bad. And the key for designing an experiment is it has to be in an area that you love and you're interested in. Because it's an experiment, you have to be doing something that no one else has ever done. If someone else has done it, you can just read about their experiment. You don't have to do an experiment on your own. So what's going to happen is, by doing an experiment, you're going to add to the world's knowledge. So it's something you're passionate about. It's something that's never been done before. It's something that costs very little time and money, and it's something with enormous upside, and it's something you'll learn from even if it fails. So no experiment is a failure. Even though I didn't do that idea that I was experimenting on, it wasn't a failure because I learned a huge amount, and I also got better at doing experiments. I do new experiments almost every single day. Okay, I'm going to share another business idea that I'm looking at. And this one I think actually is a really interesting idea too. So there are websites out there which sell other small online websites that are profitable. So there, for instance, there's a website called Flippa, Flippa, Flippa.com. So at Flippa, it'll say, there's a website for sale, toenailfungus.com. Yes, that's a real website that's for sale right now. You can look it up on flippa.com. And toenailfungus.com has just links to cures, I guess, for toenail fungus, and they get affiliate fees on Amazon. So without any real upkeep, it generates, maybe a couple $1,000s in profit every month, or maybe even $500 in profit every month. And that site is for sale for a couple $1,000s. So what about buying 50 of those sites and combining them all together, using the combination to transfer traffic from one to the other, so each one of these sites starts generating more profits, and then instead of selling it, like you're going to probably buy each site for 2 or 3 times earnings, but the bigger it is, you can sell it for 10 times earnings. So you'll not only increase earnings by buying a whole bunch, but you'll also increase the multiple of earnings you could sell it for. So I think, and that's kind of how, there was a company, it used to be called Demand Media. I don't know where they are now, but they did this back in the early 00s, and they were very successful. And I kind of think the same opportunity exists now if you go to sites like flippa.com and other sites. So I think that's a decent business model as well. I gave 2 or 3 business models that I'm actually seriously thinking of doing myself right now. And again, I described what I called the Google technique of why am I sharing these ideas? Because the more abundant you are, in terms of how you express yourself and how you share ideas and how you give of yourself, the more opportunities you'll have. And I call it the Google technique because all Google does is send people to other websites. They don't do anything else. They say, oh, you're at google.com, you're at the wrong place. You need to go to motorcycles.com if you want to find out about motorcycles. Or you need to go to gonorrhea.com if you want to find out about gonorrhea. They don't know anything at Google. Their entire model is to send you elsewhere, and for that, they're worth over $1 trillion. So if they're worth over $1 trillion using that technique, who knows what it could do personally if you do that technique. So anyway, just to summarize some thoughts, I do think we're nearing the peak in the United States, in New York City, and even in the world. I think the peak in the United States is probably going to be around April 15th. That means that cases will start to stabilize and then go down. We haven't reached it yet, which is why the data is looking bad still, but we're going to reach it in just 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure, again, give or take. I do think the economy will start to reopen by the end of April, state by state or region by region or country by country. I do think we'll get the virus completely under control by the end of May or early June. And I'm not just saying this, I'm repeating what I've read in dozens of research papers and talking to many doctors. Again, I think the data gets worse before it gets better, but you just have to realize sometime in April, probably mid-April, it will peak in the US and start to go down. I recommend start listing the things that you're certain about, because right now we're living in, there's such uncertainty, health, financial, societal uncertainty. And yet, if you look at it, there's also good things in each that we could be certain about. So on a societal level, we're all together. It's the first time in the history of the human species, and I said this the other day, it's the first time in the history of the human species, we're all together united for one purpose. It's an incredible time we're living in, assuming you don't get sick, which would be unfortunate, and which is why you have to do social distancing and all that. But we're living in this amazing time, and also there's actually fewer deaths around the world because we're all staying at home. So there's no violent deaths, there's less car accidents and less drug-related deaths, less shootings. So there's actually some things we're certain about that are positive. On a health level, we're a lot more aware of our health right now. We're aware of supplements to take. We're aware of hygiene issues. Of course, I haven't always implemented those hygiene issues. We're learning a lot about pandemics, which is going to come in handy in the future, I'm sure. On a financial level, yes, there's uncertainty with our industries and our jobs, and the stock market is so crazy, but we are certain that there's this stimulus package that's going to just parachute trillions of dollars into the economy, and we are certain that this pandemic is going to end and the jobs and the economy will recover. And every single time it's recovered in the past, everyone always said, oh no, we're going to hit new lows. But eventually we hit after 9/11, it took about 7 months, but we hit all-time highs. It took longer, but we really around, 9/11 happened in September. Around March of 2002, the market really took off. The financial crisis happened in October 2008. In March of 2009, the market really took off. So that's why I'm not in a rush to buy the market. We're going to have plenty of time for opportunities. And, and I gave some business ideas, and by the way, have you found it interesting that coronavirus seems to really attack the countries and the cities the most that have the best food? So, nobody goes out into town and says, hey, let's go grab some Swedish food, or let's go grab some Singapore food. Nobody does that. But they do say, hey, let's go for Chinese tonight. Or they say, hey, let's grab some Italian food tonight. Or they say, hey, or New York City and San Francisco, these are the best two cities, and New Orleans, these are the best 3 cities in the United States for food. Guess which cities are the hardest hit by coronavirus? New Orleans, New York, and San Francisco. So I guess the point is, stay away from places with good food, and maybe you're less likely to get coronavirus. Meanwhile, I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. for Instagram Live. I am so happy you guys are here and enjoying this. And please tweet me questions during the day, and I'll answer them tomorrow at 2 p.m. About anything. Or you can email me, altucher@gmail.com, with questions, and I'm happy to answer either via email or tomorrow on the IG Live. And also on Instagram, I have a few posts to go. I'm offering some books for free. It's my quarantine book giveaway. Check it out. Follow the instructions. There's no strings attached other than you have to follow me and you have to comment on your 3 favorite books, and then you get thrown in a basket. I'm picking a bunch of people and I will send the books. One of the books that I'm giving away is Mastery by Robert Greene, and it's such an awesome book. Robert Greene is such a smart guy. I wanted to read something that I bookmarked, but I forgot where it is. Oh, I'll close with this quote. So this is from Robert Greene's book, Mastery. Masters are those who by nature have suffered to get to where they are. They've experienced endless criticisms and rejection of their work, doubts about their progress, setbacks along the way. So anytime you're mastering something, you're going to that room that's less crowded, and everyone's going to tell you, you can't do that. But success in mastery is on the other side of all the people who are telling you you can't do something. So with that, I will see you tomorrow, IG Live. Avoid cities and countries with great food if you don't want to get this horrible virus. Keep social distancing. See you tomorrow at 2 p.m. And I'll also share this. I'll share this live on my stories and my live stories, and maybe I'll start sharing these on YouTube. I might do that also. Thanks so much, everybody.